Hello, my friends. One day, a book arrives in my hands at the right time, as always. It's called Kundalini. It tells in the first person the adventure that happened to the author. He is an Indian from a very religious and practicing family. That one would have thoughts prepared for what was to follow. He lives in India and is in its 30s when the Kundalini awakens. This took place in the years from 1930 to 1950, well before the Hindu and Buddhism sects swept over the Western world with all their adaptation to the business culture. It describes phenomena on the same kind as what happened to me, but with much greater intensity and inconveniences that I did not experience. Sometimes he was no longer hungry and no longer ate, apparently fed by its force. Sometimes, on the contrary, he couldn't help devouring everything when there was war and he could hardly manage to feed his family. I also felt this phenomena, but much more slightly. He sees houses, objects, with silvery halos of light. I perceive it too, but very faintly. He alternates periods of extraordinary happiness with considerable suffering that I have not experienced. At one point, he evoked the rise of the Kundalini in his spine. It can be done in two ways. Either as a single stream of energy that rises undulating exactly at the caduceus of the pharmacist around the main axis, or split into two streams, hot and cold, as the caduceus of the authors. In fact, this caduceus, whose meaning the West has forgotten, are boards of energy anatomy. The main axis passes through the spinal cord of the spine. The Indians call it the Sushumna. The two currents are called Ida, cold current, and Pingala, warm current. The author writes that on clides where cold energy dominates, it slavers and freezes until it happens. Other time, he suffers an infernal heat that burns him when it is the hot current. I'm struck as I read this text that not for a moment did he think, nor did he appear to God, which would have had the effect of making this harmful effect disappear in an instant. I felt from Hinduism and Buddhism, I'm not talking about popular superstitions, that there is a very great knowledge of the mechanism of spiritual energy and the planes of enlightenment, unlike Christianity, but lost in the midst of a multitude of gods, avatars, rituals, superstitions that uphold the notion of a unique God. This gentleman says, like me, that he has never encountered chakras, and he goes so far as to write that he seriously doubts their very existence. I don't go that far. I don't know everything. I simply know that I have never seen them, not perceived them, and that it is not necessary to open them in order to access high planes of enlightenment, not to be a vegetarian. One notable difference between our two experiences is that he never talks about transmitting this energy to anyone. He never feels the need for it, as I felt after the white flames with blush edges penetrate my head. Very annoyed by what he was going through, he traveled over India, trying to find someone who would know what to do to help him. He reports that he met many sages, ascetics, and gurus, and that none of them had experienced a Kundalini awakening, accidental or provoked. Yet they spoke with such aplomb to their disciples. With my roommates, we decided one evening to go and have a drink in a drugstore located in the new buildings in Puteaux, on the other side of the Avenue de la Défense, which was beginning to be built. At a nearby table, we met a group of girls and hung out with one of them named Dany. Very quickly, we began a sexual adventure more friend than lovers that went without a hitch. She made me meet one of her friends, Francisco, of Spanish origin, who was very warm, and I quickly became friends with him. He was a very famous interior designer who had been in a big trouble. One day, while he was speeding on the road with his Jaguar, a police motorcycle came to his right to make him stop. Surprised, he took a left turn without seeing that there were another biker that he ran over. And while trying to correct his trajectory, he also ran over the other biker. His Jaguar was seized, and the fine he received was so large that he closed his agency, and in order to pay it, he had to sell second-hand that he had restored about 50 kilometers from Paris. He gave us the keys and told us to take advantage of it on weekends as long as it was not sold. It was a very beautiful renovation, combining modernism with the old, and we spent some pleasant moments there. At that time, I was introduced to successful singers of South American origin, the Guaranis. The lady singers and leader of the group, with foresight, wanted to invest their earnings in a restaurant they had just acquired in the 5th arrondissement of Paris, behind the Panthéon, Rue Mouffetard. She asked me to decorate in the spirit of a farmhouse to be called the El Rancho Guarani. I had already realized that I felt more like an interior designer, and I jumped at the opportunity to go in that direction. Francisco introduced me to a company he worked with, and we started the work. Dany generously lent me his car, a Dauphine, with which I crisscrossed the countryside to find old materials, including old bills. I received the first third of the order and paid the company. Apparently, everything was going well, and I would periodically monitor the work. But when it came time for the third and final payment, the client told me that she had paid it directly to the company, which had threatened to storm everything, no longer needing my service. Unhappy to have been bypassed and not having received my share, I went to the construction site, where I found myself alone in the middle of a dozen workers and a mad boss who refused to give me anything. In his anger, he revealed to me that Francisco was not the interior designer he claimed to be, and that the story he was telling was that of his former boss, for whom he worked as a later painter. He hoped to sell the houses he had made us know, so that he could animate them with our presence. As the contractor was becoming more and more threatening, I had to slip away as quickly as possible, and the door was barely closed when I heard a loud crash into it. I had felt hot, and my career as an interior designer ended there. Years later, while I was on the Longchamp racetrack with a fellow horse photographer, I saw Francisco with a worn shirt yelling with the crowd to encourage the horse he had bet on. He didn't see me, and I had no desire to talk to him.